So good afternoon, everybody. This is my first experience of holding a Zoom conference, so excuse me if I press more buttons than I'm supposed to. Good afternoon, welcome to, some of us are in Norwich University of the Arts. We have Gretchen in Seattle and Richard in Birmingham. So thanks to the power of the internet, we're all over the place. We are recording this meeting, so we can hopefully use it to be played back later for other people. I'm going to start with a short introduction and then we shall hear what everyone has to say. So a little bit about me. This project is really all about me. I'm studying for an MA in curation in Norwich University of the Arts. My first degree was not arts-based. I come from a history background, which I did at the University of East Anglia, also in Norwich. It took a while to iron out my vision for this part of my degree as I tussled with the notion of access and how could I alter access, whatever that is. It's been a constant theme for me. Pretty much every module from my degree, I've considered access, focused on it, and how I might prefer the visiting experience to be. So for my master's project, I knew access would remain a key topic. And I also realized that trying to create the perfect and ideal setting was not really the reality for many others. A ramp is not enough, and nor is it the physical barriers. The physical barriers are not the most problematic. There are other things in place. So I've just realized my work was printed on two sides. Just thrown me, sorry. So how do I understand the emotions that surge through me when I visit a gallery or a historic setting, when it does not allow for my disabled son to engage in the same way as myself or his brothers? I've been the angry one, I've tried to raise questions with staff and I've written emails, but all my frustrations just build up. So that's my reason why. The reason why I push on to try and get arts more accessible to everybody. And as much as access could ruin our day, or if we let it, we generally now walk around and re-curate the space ourselves. So as the 16-year-old, he's quite aware that things are not set out for him. I will add there are some positive elements, but these can come at a price. So when we get the great parking or the lift access that might take us through the private library, we do get to see the background tour and a little of something else, but we're not usually alone. We're not making choices at our own leisure, and we need to be escorted and let out again. And I should say some parking spaces need to be booked 48 hours in advance. So that kind of limits our spontaneity with visiting culture. The pre-planning is a COVID leftover for many now, having to book to enter museums, but this has applied to disabled visitors like us for a long time. I realised quite soon into this journey, though, that although spatial design is an important factor in making exhibitions accessible, I now feel that to me, it's more about the audience, who they are, how they feel, and how they experience the setting. And who is that audience? But more importantly, who are they expected to be? So I didn't realize my printing's on two sides. So as I've alluded to, I have got a son who's disabled. I have 4 children, and we often go to events and cultural settings. And whilst my youngest 2 were smaller, I was also the parent that would turn up with a double pushchair as well as a wheelchair using young man. And we were certainly not the standard idea of a family. We did not very often fit into one lift. We would have to be separated. I'd have to send the oldest 2 ahead in the lift and while I waited. So we would often be missing parts of the art, but we still pushed on and wanted to be immersed in the settings. So this project that I'm setting up today is 3 parts. This is my master's final project. The first is an installation of the work of art you can now see in flashing, pieces 1 to 6 by Caroline Ingham, who will be speaking next. She has kindly brought this down for me from London today, and we have installed it in the windows of the Duke Street building outside, which is street facing, so we're COVID secure. And hopefully many people will be able to wander past and have a look. I first met Caroline, actually. I met all my speakers through internet connections, so like dating for speakers, really. Caroline spoke at a newer Norwich University Arts Symposium, and that's the first place I saw this work. I saw it online first, and it was very much the shadows that I was drawn to when I first saw the image, and that's given the title to this work, called it shadow work, I feel sometimes the members of the audience who I want to be considered are the shadows. They're left on the edges, maybe not considered important. But in this piece of work, I see the shadows as in equal measure to the structures that Caroline has produced. I see them as maybe as strong in this image. I don't know how other people might see it, although it has been interesting to see it in real life. I'm a great believer in accessing art has been enabled to a certain degree by online and by allowing museums to step up and use COVID to provide their galleries online. But I have really enjoyed seeing this in the flesh, as it were. Let's show you around. So the second part of my project is still in production, really. I'm gathering together testimonies from real life people who have real stories to share about how they feel about access. This testimony, if you can see it all, is from Professor Hayhow. She herself has a life-limiting lung condition. So if you want to read it, she has a son, and her son's school lift accesses the top floor where his classroom is. So for pickup, I go up in a lift. It opens on the inside of the building, while all the other parents who take the stairs, which are external, congregate outside the classroom door. I see them chatting through the window, and it always hurts a little. I feel very strongly that sharing these kinds of testimonies can build together for other curators and other institution settings that may be considering access through the real eyes of the people who are affected by different access choices and different access realities. They share a different perspective. I know that there are legalities with access, but actually the personal experiences, they might change how you see what has been provided. So the second one, this was from an artist called Dolly Sen, a local lady who, she says, I can enter an art space with my legs, but sometimes I can't enter it with my mind. When looks and silences make me feel small, and that's by the workers of the art space, it hurts. I want to get lost in the art, not made lost by the people looking after the art. When she sent me this email, it's almost shattering to feel that people still are not feeling welcome into gallery settings. I mean, it's 2021 and we have so many changes being made, but actually if your mind is preventing you from approaching art, how can we make the art galleries understand that that's already stopped people at the front door, so we stop them coming in. Right. So part of my journey, I'm just going to backtrack a little bit, is that I do understand that the physical settings that could impact the audience as a visitor, and my son is one of those. I realised that exhibitions are not designed for him. And how could they be? A chair using child is completely the wrong height for just about everything. Text displays, the cases, and even screens. I'm really sorry, I'm going to have to sort my notes out. Who knew that things printed on two sides? And I dropped them. Right, so let's move on. Anyway, my speakers. Caroline is a visual-based artist, and she has recently completed her MA in Fine Art. She's a vast knowledge and experience in exhibition design, having been head of design. Honestly, I didn't know that they did this, and then it all jumbled up. The printer has played a little trick with me. At the Natural History Museum, and also she designed at the British Museum, the Egyptian Funerary Archaeology Galleries and the Enlightenment Gallery. And now she's concentrating on her art full time. Caroline's work looks at reclaiming existence beyond a state of health as the norm and challenging the idea of what is considered straight, healthy, neurotypical or productive, and how as a society we understand those descriptions and how we are led by them. And then after Caroline, we will have Richard speaking, and I first heard Richard also speak at the Arts Marketing Association. It was the Inclusivity and Audiences Day. Again, it was hearing the language that resonates with me. Richard spoke about his cast. They're all young people with learning disabilities and how they fit in and how they're seen by society. This made me want to hear more from him and to share the work with you. Richard has 25 years experience with open theatre, and as an organisation, they seek to view learning disabilities as creative differences. They value the contribution that is made by the young people, and they give them full and fair access to theatre. And then, thank you, Gretchen, for being up so early. Gretchen Wilson-Prangley was one of the presenters of the next museum summit. That's where I saw her way back in February. And there she spoke of the role that Play Africa, the museum in South Africa that she founded, was able to take on with the pandemic. She's still striving to provide contact to as many families as possible, even with the restrictions and the technical issues, and like every museum and gallery in the world, suddenly finding themselves left with only the digital world to use. With Play Africa, Gretchen has been able to provide a setting in Johannesburg that offers all the local children, and importantly, their families, access to education, to be inspired, and to feel that the future is something that they, as young citizens, could and should engage with, building a museum intentionally without barriers. So curation is about sharing knowledge and content and collections. But if you cannot get in, does it matter how you curate? Okay. There we are, Caroline. Sorry for my, there was more, but I'm sure everyone else has much more to share. Let's come on and hear Caroline. I'm gonna mute myself. Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you. Just put my slideshow up. There we go. So thank you very much to Alison for the invitation to be part of today's event. As she said, I'm Caroline and I'm a visual artist, and I made Enfleshings 1-6, which is currently on display in the foyer here at Norwich University of the Arts. So my work examines our relationship with our bodies at times of vulnerability and bodily doubt. Bodily doubt is a term coined by Anne-Marie Kramer in a lecture she gave at the Symposium on Vulnerability and Resistance at Central St Martin's in 2019. In it, she describes her own experience of working as an artist with a life-threatening spinal condition. She is absolute in her conviction that illness changes our whole way of being in the world. She says, illness is a form of knowledge with existential impact. Illness modifies and sheds light on normal experience, revealing ordinary overlooked structures. As she describes it, illness puts us in a state of vulnerability or not knowing, a state that she sees as being essential to creative activity. My explorations of this subject centers around the flawed presumption of health as a norm. I'm specifically interested in the narratives that we create, the personal narratives we create, to enable us to navigate experiences of trauma and illness. This is something that Arthur W. Frank explores in his book, The Wounded Storyteller. He says, the postmodern experience of illness begins when ill people recognize that more is involved in their experiences than the medical story can tell. The loss of life's map and destination are not medical symptoms, at least not until some psychiatric threshold is reached. But the scope of modernist medicine does not include helping patients think differently about their post-illness worlds and construct new relationships to those worlds. And he has spent his life, his career, reconciling the patient's and clinician's view of illness through something that he describes as narrative medicine. So these ideas manifest in my own practice as a deep concern with the quality and character of the materials that I use to create three-dimensional assemblages, which I term as feelingscapes of the body. The textures of these works are intended to suggest something of our internal physiology, as well as inciting ideas about the psychological sense we have of ourselves. I'm particularly interested in the relationship we have with our bodies and the false division between the biological body, as medically defined, and our lived experience of our bodies. The aim of my work is to engender ideas through sensation, to prompt consideration of what it is like to live and navigate the world in a vulnerable body, something which is true of us all, but we often don't perceive it this way. Concepts of the body and health are contained in my work, but also influence the way I see my work being exhibited. Having had a career as an exhibition designer, I see the potential of using the context in which work is displayed, associating it with a particular venue, as a way of positively reinforcing the themes or concepts my work contains. The exhibition venue can therefore become very important. Here on the right, you can see an exhibition layout, a proposal for displaying Perceptual Shift, a series of 4 of my works that I made last year, and the proposed venue on the left, which is the Old Operating Theatre Museum in London. The image of the space, you can see it is a surgical operating theatre, and it was specifically built for female patients in 1822. And this was a period of time where there were almost no female doctors. And so the only woman who would appear in this space would have been the patient. Displaying the works here would magnify the themes of the work and the ideas that interest me of health, our bodies, and women's perspective on these. It's not just the associations made by displaying the work in a particular venue that can do this. It can be something more subtle, such as the type of lighting used, or the layout of the work, or even the fixtures used to install the works. Here on the left, you can see the type of lighting used in a field hospital, which could be reproduced in a gallery. In the center is Christine Borland's work, Bison Bison, which she's laid out with forensic precision on these white trestle tables, suggesting that type of detailed looking that you get from forensics or an archaeological dig. And on the right is a flesh hook used to install my own work, Fisher. But access is of paramount importance to me, but I'm fully aware that displaying my work in a venue that lacks acceptable physical access could have the opposite effect to what I've just been describing, and would undermine or even contradict the ideas that I'm concerned with and seek to challenge through my work. A major challenge to selecting the Old Operating Theatre as an exhibition venue is the access. A narrow spiral staircase shown here on the left. This makes the venue completely inappropriate as an exhibition venue for my work, prompting either selection of another venue altogether or adopting a different approach, making a film of the work displayed in the space so that this could be shown elsewhere, or creating a virtual reality viewing or a soundtrack describing or recording the sounds in the venue might be a way of approaching it. But it's not only physical access that I'm interested in, but also making works accessible to in many different ways. For instance, to audiences that wouldn't normally visit a gallery or might feel uncomfortable doing so. On the right, you can see an image of Lockdown 2020, a collective artwork. This resulted from a project that I initiated last year and culminated in the display of the work on Peckham Rye, a park local to where I live. So these 3 images show some details from my recent works, and they illustrate the importance of textures and materials to what I'm making. The works themselves emerge as a result of a variety of different types of research that I'm constantly engaged with. These broadly fall into 4 categories: drawing research, speculative making, desk-based research, and writing. Drawing research is something that I very often undertake in museum medical collections, and it's a method I use to assimilate imagery of the physical body. On the left are some rib bones showing the effects of illness during a person's lifetime, and these were drawn at the Museum of London in their human osteology collection, which is a just fantastic archive. And on the right is a 17th century anatomy table showing the venal system, which I drew at the Royal College of Physicians. These images don't directly appear in the final pieces of work, but this type of drawing gives me an understanding of the body and creates an archive of imagery in my head, which I draw on when making work. Speculative making means that I'm continually experimenting with techniques and researching the sort of precise materials that I want to use in my work. From biodegradable cellulose sheeting to liquid acrylics with super high pigment content. Experimenting or playing with these materials cultivates an understanding of their properties, which is essential and enables me to develop a unique set of tools or visual language that I can use to best reflect my ideas and make the work. Sometimes the materials lead the work, and sometimes the work is led by the materials. Experimentation can take many different forms, from casting plaster and making molded wax and fabric forms to perfecting the exact color of hand-dyed vats of fabric seen here on the left, and soak staining large quantities of canvas on the studio floor, as shown on the right. Speculative making can have unexpected outcomes, and experience has taught me that no experiment or impulse should be ignored, as often these impulses lead to the most unexpected and interesting outcomes, sometimes not for months or even years later. Here on the left, you see a drawing I made on impulse of a piece of soak-stained canvas. And on the right is a pile of hand-dyed and laser-cut canvas. Many months after I'd made the drawing, it became the inspiration for the vector drawing to use to make the laser-cut canvas. And in turn, this became the Enfleshing series. On the left, you see Enfleshing 1, and on the right is a detail of the work. You can see how I've used the laser cut fabric, stitched into it and patched it to create the work. Desk-based research is also really important. And of course, I do a lot of art reading, criticism and monographs, and visit lots of exhibitions. And I do have a particular interest in the work of artists who are concerned with the body and health. But my research material also includes reading about health and personal testimony and experience of illness. Research that is essential to help me constantly challenge and reinvigorate my own ideas. Here is a very small selection of books that I most often return to at the moment. Javi Corral, who Alison mentioned earlier, works at the University of Bristol, and her book, Illness, is an amazing philosophical investigation into her experience of a life-limiting lung disease. In it, she investigates ideas of illness, in particular, the false separation of the biological body and our lived experience. She says, illness is not simply a problem with the physiological body, but a problem with the whole embodied person and her relationship with her environment. Because the lived body is not just the biological body, but one's contextual being in the world. A disruption of bodily capacities has a significance that far exceeds that of simple biological dysfunction. It is not just a body function that's disrupted, rather one's entire way of being in the world is altered. Most recently, I have been casting resin from stitched works. It's a laborious process where the stitched pieces are first cast in plaster and then molds made from the plaster to cast the resin. The resulting small translucent pieces, no bigger than the palm of your hand, create shadows from forms that are hardly visible themselves. These provoke ideas about what or who is visible and in what circumstances, concepts that are particularly pertinent to the theme of today's symposium. In the second edition of The Wounded Storyteller, Arthur W. Frank writes about his own experience of having cancer and draws attention to all those who are living with incurable conditions. He says, at the end of the story I wrote about my own experience of having cancer, I use the term remission society to describe all those people who, like me, are effectively well, but could never be considered cured. These people are all around, although often invisible. Writing is the fourth mode of research I constantly engage with. The translucent resin forms I'm currently making are the beginning of a new body of work. At the moment, I'm experimenting with putting them together with some of my writing. Sometimes I want to shrug you off like an abandoned snakeskin, step out of you like a discarded slip left soft and crumpled on the floor. More violently, to pumice you away under a scalding hot shower. But it is impossible. You are inside me, not living on the surface, an invisible killer living in me, living off me. We are mutually dependent. I feel a twinge of guilt. How can I reject you? My own creation, our destinies entwined. It will be ever thus, the tussle between us. Myself and the world trying to keep you down, whilst you continue to struggle for your own survival. I can understand it. You are only doing what is right for you. But understand me, your killing or repression is a battle I have to fight, a deed I have to do. Like you, it is in my DNA. We will struggle together and apart, though one day I know eventually you will win. There is a chance to see more of my work in the flesh at the Copeland Gallery in November. I'll certainly be sending Alison some invites, which I'm sure she'll pass on, or do contact me direct. Thank you for your time. I'm sure, like you, I'm really looking forward to hearing what Richard and Gretchen have to say, the perspectives of them. And I'm very happy to answer any questions you may have now, or do send me comments via Instagram or by email.
Thank you, Caroline. Is there any questions? I don't see any coming through just yet. That was really, really interesting. Thank you, and to share so much about your work. I think the time-consuming section is really interesting, how long you spend with each piece, really subtly changing it time by time. It's and like I say, seeing it in the flesh, I have questioned how we access online art, and it's really, your piece is beautiful hanging in the sunlight in the window. As much as I enjoyed seeing it represented on a screen, it does change for me to see work up close. So thank you for bringing it.
That's great. No, it's been a pleasure.
So Richard, can we get you to unmute yourself, please? And then I think you need to share a link with me, don't you?
Yes. I'm just going to very briefly outline who I am and the company. And then we've got this link to a video, which I think is better if you click on and watch on your own laptop than us trying to share it, because we've got problems with sound. So I'm Richard Hayhow, and I've actually been running Open Theatre for 30 years. Just that's fine. It does seem a very long time. We're based in Birmingham and Coventry, and we work with young people with learning disabilities. Many years ago, I set up a theatre company called The Shysters through Open Theatre, and that was a company of 10 actors with learning disabilities who we trained, and we toured the country with various pieces of work over a period of about 10 years. But through that work, we developed what we call a non-verbal physical theatre practice. And the reason I'm saying that is because our kind of approach to access and understanding of access is absolutely at the core of what you do. It's not an add-on. So my training in theatre was very traditional. And when I started working with actors with learning disabilities, I found that nothing I'd been taught worked. So through that process of working with these actors almost exclusively, invisibly, in a very shut away place, I had the freedom with those actors to explore a different way of making theatre. So access for us has never been an add-on, it's always at the heart of the work. But ultimately, I'm talking about the process of this, rather than some of the more interesting issues around how do you get other people to access what you're doing. So there's a difference for me there, although they're very connected. Just a quick update. Now we're an Arts Council National Portfolio organisation, which means we get regular funding from the Arts Council, and we've expanded massively over the past 4 years, including through COVID. Amazingly, we have grown through COVID, which is just so brilliant. The core of our work is in special schools across Birmingham and Coventry, and we use our non-verbal theatre practice with those young people. We probably reach about 2,000 young people a year through that sustained work. And then within the schools we do, the practice isn't just about theatre, it's about enabling young people to discover their creativity and discover to some extent who they are and what they want to do with their lives. So we work in school, but we also work in settings out of school. And we call those projects enrichment projects because they're taking young people onto a next stage of development. And we do large-scale performance work still. So we were just in the middle of a national tour of Hansel and Gretel when COVID struck, so we had to cancel that. We work with young people from the age of 5 to 25 and beyond, because there is no cut-off point in terms of age. You can't just say, oh, you've got to 25, you can't work with us. But also we work with the same young person from the age of 5 to 25. Some of the young people who are with us, we started working with in primary school, and they're now full-grown adults earning a living through the work that we do. So that's a kind of brief overview. And just because I think that images and movement and stuff speaks far louder than words, I want you to have a look at this video, which we produced for the, I'm not quite sure the way of saying it, the International Day of Disabled People. I'm not sure if that's the correct title, but if you can all click on that link and just, it's about 3 or 4 minutes, just have a look at the range of work that we do. I think, Alison, you might play it just in case it doesn't work, but there won't be any sound. The sound is just a music soundtrack, so it's not essential. But if you look at it yourselves, it will probably be the better way of doing that. And we'll just take a 3-minute, 4-minute break, if that's all right. So enjoy yourselves watching. Are we all back? So that just gave it's a bit of a snapshot. Some of the outdoor work is stuff we've done during COVID when we couldn't meet in rooms, and we just thought, how do we maintain contact with our young people? And it was by going out and doing work on their doorsteps individually and doing some work online. So that it just gives you a bit of a sense of how we work. Our strap line is called Doing Difference Differently. So we internally provoke ourselves to consider doing everything we do differently the next time we do it in response to the young people we work with. So we all the time try to work against any particular method or any particular product or whatever we work towards, so that it's different every time in response to the young people we work with. the other core principle of the work is that there's this sort of saying that once you've met a person with autism, you've met one person with autism. And individuality is actually at the heart of our work, rather than this spurious name that we say young people with learning disabilities, because that kind of says that everybody within that category is roughly the same. So we work against that all the time and say every single person we work with is an individual, and we have to discover their way of being creative, their way of engaging with the world through the processes that we use. And that's also why we have to constantly change our approach in order to make sure it's accessible at all times to every single individual we work with. So having survived for 30 years, we're now looking at what the next 10 years look like and what are the key things for us to consider. And so I've got 5 internal provocations for us as a company, which I'm also going to share with you and say that these are some of the really essential things that all of us need to be thinking about. So firstly, access is not a problem-solving exercise. And I think when I talked to Alison before, I said, you can put a ramp in a building, it doesn't actually solve the problem of how you treat that person when they come in the building. And also the lift example that Alison, you just used, where you do the right thing, which is put the lift in place so that some people who need to use the lift can access it, but you actually isolate those people more through that process, which is extraordinary about how we think we're, if we problem solve, we've actually solved the problem, but you've actually compounded the problem. So we all the time try to think outside the box of what needs to be doing and adapting everything we do. So how do we look at access as this kind of core thing to us as a company rather than an add-on? Oh, we want to do this, how can we make it a bit more accessible to this person? It's actually, how does accessibility be the source of creativity for us? I was at a conference once trying to talk about what we did, and I took a young man called Nick with us, who's on the autistic spectrum, and he was up speaking as well. And I said, I was thinking, how do I sum this up? And he came up with this brilliant phrase, which is difference is the new norm. And you kind of go, I get that, Nick, thank you for saying that, because you've just completely encapsulated it for me. So we work against the norm all the time. We do not have a sense of norm in that way that is sort of conventional. We always say, what is different? How do we challenge the norm? How do we do things in a different way? And the example I've used a lot is the notion of relaxed performances. So relaxed performances in the way they've spread across this country are amazing. They're great. They're some of the best times I've had in the theatre are in a relaxed performance, because they are relaxed and you feel totally at ease and there's so much fun going on. But ultimately, they're a different way of isolating the people we work with. They're a different way of saying, it's great we can provide for you, but we're not going to mix you with other people, because a relaxed performance is only for people with learning disabilities or on the autistic spectrum. So how do we challenge that notion? And another colleague of mine said, well, maybe we should make all the performances that everyone does relaxed and create a different category of performance called uptight performances for everybody who wants that more uptight experience of when you go to the theatre. So instead of what we see at theatres being the norm, the relaxed performance becomes everywhere. And then if there's a certain group of people who don't like that, we can provide them with an uptight performance. Now, you don't necessarily have to go that far, but just thinking like that begins to challenge every notion of what we're doing. So why are relaxed performances still something on their own, separated from the rest of society? So that was provocation number 2. Provocation number 3 for ourselves is we work in special schools, and I keep saying this, we are deeply privileged to be able to work with a vast range of young people with an incredible range of learning disabilities, from mild autism right the way to complex and profound, and you see humanity in an extraordinary sense if you work in special schools. It's amazing. But what we've realized increasingly over the years is that the young people who are visible in society with learning disabilities are the kind of what, it's always a difficulty to find the right words, but they're the young people who are able to conform to the ways we would like them to perform in society. So roughly 20% of the young people we work with in schools are visible in society. The rest, the 80%, remain, for want of a better expression, institutionalized for the rest of their lives. We as a company want to find ways to challenge the visibility or the invisibility of the 80% through our work, to get them out with us doing stuff in communities, in art centres, wherever it is. That's a real challenge for us, but I think it's also a challenge for society, because so many people that we work with say, oh yes, we do work with people with learning disabilities. We've got someone on the autistic spectrum working with. You go, okay, that's fine. It may be amazing for that person, but there's no way you are working with that broad range of learning disability. So we need to up the ante on that. Fourth provocation, and this has come about through our work in special schools. The working in a special school is an amazing experience, because most special schools are not constrained by curriculum. You have the freedom to explore creativity and all sorts of ways of engaging in a different way. But ultimately, we live in a society in which we segregate people. Our education system is segregated. And one young woman who came to work with us said, do you know, this is the first time I've ever met a person with a learning disability, because at school, I went to mainstream school and there was no contact whatsoever. And that is a hugely significant statement about the way we run our society and the lack of integration, and the issues that causes us as a company, because we work exclusively with young people with learning disabilities, and other young people do not know what we do not connect with what we do, and therefore we are in some ways maintaining a segregated society through our work. How do we challenge that? So lastly, I think just going back to the range of people that we work with and value of a human being's life, is that we are constantly challenged to reassess what we value in being a human being through our work. And that's in a positive way, but it's also something that constantly challenges us. So for example, a lot of the young people we work with would not operate in this context whatsoever. So how do we value somebody who cannot do this? And yet this process we're engaged in is seen as the way to do things. And therefore, if you can't do it, you're somewhat a lesser human being. So I think that question for us is, how do we value human life in a way that gives everybody some kind of positivity about who they are, is really important. So yeah, that's kind of me, really. It's a bit of a snapshot of what we do and why we do it, but these are real challenges for us. And we started off, as running, I just wanted to make theatre with young people with learning disabilities. And then you realise you're in this really complex world of segregation, of prejudice, of discrimination, of a situation where a young woman with Down syndrome can be given no resuscitation order by a doctor in a context where he wouldn't have given that if that was not a young person with Down syndrome. You live in a world that is stacked against the young people we work with, and therefore we are underachieving because of that. So, there you go. End of my.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard. I've said it before, your work and how you discuss it does highlight the segregation very strongly that we don't see across section of society. I mean, my son attends a state school, but he's the only wheelchair using child, but he is still kept fairly separate even in his education because of access, you know, even the routes he has to take around. So, you know, it's happening everywhere, even though, like you said, they try and bring them together, they still end up being separated. Does anyone else have any questions? I'm wondering if people can type questions in the chat. Is that, so feel free, please feel free if you can. I'm sure Richard would be very happy to answer any questions, or maybe at the end. Yes, it's good that you're doing it, and it's good that we're talking about it, because I do think to re-describe the first person narrative is a really big step to re-understanding what we think has been delivered as in access, because I think once we go back to that first person story, it might not be achieving all that everyone thinks inclusivity is achieving, sadly, but we can do it. Okay, thank you, Richard. It's really, really, really great of you to talk through your theatre group with us like that. So Gretchen, thank you. We get you to unmute, and then if you want to take the screen.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed the presentations so far. So thank you for sharing. I really learned a lot. I think as an institution, Richard really highlighted a lot of things that feel very resonant for us here at Play Africa. I will share my screen because I find it easier to show imagery. So my name is Gretchen Wilson-Prangley, and I am the founder and CEO of Play Africa. And we're a children's museum and education makerspace based at Constitution Hill, which is an iconic space in Johannesburg, South Africa. It's home to South Africa's Constitutional Court. It is a former prison that is now a human rights precinct. And what we do there is try to catalyze innovations in playful and inclusive learning, foregrounding children's rights and the rights of all humans, thinking about new ways to engage parents in their children's education and development, and coming up with new ways to imagine and reimagine social cohesion in a society that is widely unequal, extraordinarily diverse and diffuse, and has been designed previously to keep people apart. And how do we think about new ways to bring people together? So we really embrace this idea of disruptive innovation to disrupt not only the museum sector, but really disrupting the entire education system within South Africa, disrupting the cultural sector, disrupting apartheid era spatial divides that keep people divided and apart. And we do that by thinking about new ways to bring the latest thinking in education and inclusion and playful learning into a shared space, and then how people can bring that same thinking back home to their homes, to their classrooms, and to the communities in which they live. We do that from Constitution Hill, but we know that we also, not everyone can come to us, so we go out to where children are, whether it be in parks or in community centers, rooftops, streets, playgrounds and other spaces. So we really are a flexible, whilst we have a location, we really see ourselves as a museum without walls. We do this because we believe that everyone deserves access to safe environments where they can play, create, discover, and connect with one another. And the reality is that in South Africa, only 29% of children, according to UNICEF, have access to safe play areas. This is obviously unacceptable, and we need to think about new ways to reach children and provide them with these kinds of environments where they can develop with the kinds of safe and nurturing space, and to play and to learn together. And we use this decentralized model that really transform those public spaces, as I mentioned, the parks, community centers, rooftops, other spaces. And we want to do this in a way that brings this to every child. So just as Richard had mentioned, accessibility is the point and not so much the after effect or the thing that we think about at the very end. So what I just want to share a little bit about is our museum and audience, and then our approach to accessibility. And hopefully this can just provide some inspiration or share a little bit of our thinking. So our audience is made up of children from across Johannesburg, and increasingly as we move to the digital world across South Africa and the African continent, and frankly, many other children around the world as well are tuning in to the work that we're doing. We have found that about 92% of the children that we serve are children who would be considered Black under triple BEE codes in South Africa, which is a way to acknowledge the disadvantages of the past by tracking who is able to access our space. 8.6% of the children that we serve are children with known disabilities. And we do this very proactively because we are reaching out to communities. And we do this because we believe that every child is complete, every child is a full citizen. They are curious, capable, and strong, and able to engage with the world. And we do that at whatever way and capacity that those children are at. And we do this in a way that is foregrounded by our learning framework and our theory of change. So there's a lot of kind of the backing that we do to be able to track and understand how children experience our space. We provide a range of different experiences for children across science, technology, engineering, maths, the arts, and you'll see that we also do that in partnership with parents and educators, using playful experiences to bring children together with grown-ups that love them, and provide opportunities for literacy, numeracy, early childhood development, and provide an environment that it's almost like a creative lab to inspire families to bring some of this work that we do back into their homes. We do this in a way that is meant to be quick and fast and low cost, because we know that we want to create a replicable model that can be inspire others to do the same. So we don't overthink. And I like what Richard had said about if you want an uptight version of what we have to offer, you might go somewhere else, because I think by keeping what we're doing very much putting the child at the center, we found that we don't need the kinds of very expensive, potentially exclusionary content that what we have to offer tends to be light, quick, and easy. We do this with thinking a lot about active citizenship and how children as citizens are co-creators of our experience. And we're at the end of this month going to be launching a new free virtual toolkit about how we use children and empower them with design thinking to create installations and improvements in their own neighborhoods. So we really think a lot about design thinking and putting empathy at the heart of everything that we do, including creating of our exhibits, our programs. And we do that because we see it as a very much a pathway to empower children to become active citizens in the work that they do. That we also bring that quite literally to helping children understand issues about being a citizen in a democratic society, like participating in a society in which a constitution and the rule of law gives everyone equal rights under the law, and helping them understand the constitution, human rights, children's rights, and how to participate in contexts like a courtroom environment, but also through the process of democratic elections. So a lot of the work that we do, whilst some of it will include things like STEM and STEAM learning, we also very much put active citizenship and building a nation at the heart of our work, because we believe it is important that everyone is told by someone in these young years that they have a very important voice to participate in our democracy. We think a lot about how we can include children who oftentimes are facing multiple challenges. So this is an example of a program and an exhibit that we developed called Bridges of Peace, which is designed to address issues of xenophobia and violence in schools, particularly against recent immigrants to South Africa. But we have found that it's really been a tool that's been embraced by schools really as a tool to discuss and try to respond to bullying and other kinds of exclusionary practices within a classroom or a school environment. And this is a traveling exhibition that can go to any school or any space. And it's been a very powerful installation. So I wanted to share just some ideas that we have found for our approach to accessibility. And I share this picture of, in the center there is really the second employee of Play Africa is Mpotsele, who was our inclusivity coordinator, as well as our play and learning supervisor. And unfortunately, she passed away on the 1st of January this year, but I just wanted to acknowledge her profound role in designing Play Africa and our approach. She really has left an enormous impact on the organization as a whole by constantly reminding us to really think about inclusion at every step of the way. The two principles that really, I think, categorize or characterize our approach to accessibility is the concept of nothing about us without us. We really found that through working in partnership with many organizations, such as the National Association of Persons with and for Persons with Disabilities, Autism South Africa, Deaf South Africa, other organizations that are representing individuals with disabilities, inviting them as co-designers into our programs and our responses has been a very powerful way to ensure that we are never presuming to know what is necessary in an environment like ours. And the other key concept that I think characterizes our approach is our own internal mission, which is something that our entire team can tell you is at the center of our approach to our work, which is that we are people with dignity serving people with dignity. That fundamental idea, I think, is critical to think about how we have responded in removing barriers to access as much as possible. So fundamentally, we see the barriers to access as the disability, that we believe that if we can help remove those barriers, we can be a space that can attract and be inclusive for all. So that the environment itself, including the environment, if I include into the environment how people's response, again, acknowledging Richard's comments that how we treat people is such a critical important beyond just the physical barriers to access. So we take this former prison space, which is an extremely hostile environment and built to be brutal as a former prison to those who are incarcerated there, and we transform it into a joyful playscape for children and families to come together and to share and joyfully learn together. And by removing those physical barriers to access, we strive to make sure that everyone is fully included. That includes things like, if you can see in the background in this picture in the upper left-hand corner, you can see that this is a child who really loved the look of our Imagination Playground, and with the help of his caregiver, who is there on the right, we're able to situate him in the midst of the Imagination Playground and give him an experience of playing just as he had seen all the other children play. And one of the things that I included this picture because I had several parents of more traditionally able-bodied children come to me and say, in our society, we really don't see children with disabilities out and about in spaces like this. And it's the first time that I've been able to share with my child how we can remove these barriers to access. And so we really start to imagine that what we're trying to do is model what an inclusive society can look like. And what again, this idea of segregation, again, really resonated for me that Richard had mentioned, that we're trying to create a space where what happens if we try to be even more proactive in actively reaching out to people with disabilities to include them in our programs. So if we look at a national incidence of approximately 3% of children who are known to have disabilities, what if we double that as a target with a 6% rate of children accessing Play Africa? And that's how we've really pushed that to be able to push that up to 8.6%. We really do this by stretching ourselves. I think it's really critical to share that we're not just simply opening our doors and saying, well, everybody's welcome. We're trying to really think proactively about how do we mainstream children with disabilities into our programs so that it's not simply assuming that by opening our doors alone, people will come. So we will go out and partner with various schools, special schools, as Richard had mentioned. We don't have nearly the same kind of support at an education level here in South Africa as I believe there is in the UK. Many children with disabilities are not in school. Many children with disabilities are discouraged from enrolling in schools. So we do what we can for those schools that are in existence to try to do as much as we can to reach out to them and bring whatever programs that we're bringing to mainstream schools to schools with children with disabilities as well. But we don't only think about access in terms of disability. We think about access in many other ways. How do we access audiences that traditionally would be excluded from cultural settings? So we have an outreach team who is very proactive in reaching out to early childhood development centers, nursery schools, and schools that are in communities that are traditionally very under-resourced. So they will go to, for example, schools that are informally operating in converted apartment flats. So they're private, independently run schools to educate children, but are not part of a traditional education system. And so our team will go out and climb the stairwells of these quite dilapidated buildings where schools exist and knock on the doors, meet the principals or meet the educators and invite the children who are in these schools to Play Africa. We also think about not just children, but the caregivers and parents and educators who love them, and trying to think about how we can provide experiences that they may never have had before, growing up in an apartheid state where traditional cultural institutions were oftentimes denied to so many people. So we think about ways that we can really think about all the people around the children to include them. And we think about ways in which our programs themselves can include the voices and the opinions and the perspectives of children, whatever their ability, whatever their background. We also think about ways we can reach out into informal settlements and other spaces. So this picture was taken in an informal settlement about 45 kilometers south of Johannesburg. It tends to be quite difficult to access the services of Johannesburg because it is so far away. And we think about ways that we can ourselves move to serve those children as opposed to demand that they come to us. I think one of the things that, again, is a phrase that we say a lot at Play Africa is we use this term of a judgment-free zone. And we think about the ways in which we can create opportunities to invite families and community members to come to us and do so in a way that we call, again, using this term of a judgment-free zone, making it easy for families to know that they can come and whatever their children is experiencing that day, if they're having a hard day, if they find themselves, the child is on the floor, they are shouting, whatever is how they're presenting that day, we are completely welcoming of you and your child, and that we understand that not every child is going to have a great day. And so, part of the thinking that really drove our work around our sensory play days, which are free monthly days where everyone is obviously welcome, but we particularly do a lot of outreach to children with families with children with disabilities on those days. We have found that parents have come to us and say, we've been asked to leave grocery stores, we've been asked to leave restaurants, we've been asked to leave most every public space that we go to. We now find that we rarely go out anymore because there's no place that really wants us. And so we thought, what if we turn that around and created a space where we are actually saying, we want you to come and be with us. We want this to be the place that you feel like is the safest and best place in all of Johannesburg. So that's really what prompted our sensory play days. And we do that by thinking about other ways that we can create conversations about and dialogues and playful conversations about children and their rights, including the rights of children with disabilities, but the rights of all children in our programs, including our children's courtroom. And then finally, we invent new solutions. So beyond just reaching out to audiences, we come up with things to attract our communities that we're trying to serve. So this is a picture of a sensory wall. It's a double-sided portable wall that is multi-sensory and has a lot of movement and other objects that can be opened and closed and spun and changed. This was designed locally here in South Africa to be the first kind of interactive wall, multi-sensory wall for children on the autism spectrum. We designed it with Autism South Africa, as well as the Department of Education's, the Provincial Department of Education's autism expert. And in doing so, we're able to launch this as what we understand is the first installation of its kind for children with disabilities or children on the autism spectrum in South Africa. On the right, where my hand is touching, is a little speaker that also has sounds of the South African bush. And we've seen children who are nonverbal children engage with this wall and speak into the speaker, or have experiences that are very transformative and powerful when engaging with this wall. So finally, I think I wanted to just share a little bit about what we've done in COVID-19. When COVID hit, we found ourselves adrift for several days in those moments of shutting down and confusion. And coming back to our center, we realized that we knew how to respond, which is by asking our audience what they really needed. And so we started to get on the phone with people as they were locked down in their homes and started to ask, what do you really, really need right now? From parents from Soweto to Diepsloot, we started to reach out and ask them what exactly was needed for them. And Erica is a mom who lives in Soweto with her two sons, one of whom is on the autism spectrum and one of whom is neurotypical. And she shared that when we called her, she burst into tears and said, I haven't spoken to anyone in 10 days. I've been at home alone in the backyard home where I live, where we share a yard with another neighbor. And the neighbor has a big dog, and my son is terrified. My son with autism is terrified of this dog, and so we cannot leave the house. And I thought, what if everyone has forgotten about us and we are here for forever? So what it really helped emphasize for us is just how isolated and anxious and stressed and scared we all are, and how we can use things like phone calls and other digital technology to reach out and connect one another. And that really became at the forefront of our response strategy. So in the first few weeks of lockdown, we developed a new series of interactive experiences on Facebook Live that really connect parents around issues that they care about, including connecting parents of children with disabilities and how we can address the specific needs of those parents during lockdown. But we also looked at ways of how do we parent in the inner city when we are based in small flats with very little space to play and space to run around. So these are the kinds of programs that were developed in the wake of COVID-19. We actually developed 10 new programs in the last year, including opportunities for children to share their experiences through kids' town halls. We have a robust African virtual storytelling program that has been a weekly installation for Play Africa and connecting children, not just in South Africa, but around the continent. And then we also developed an enormous program to serve 5,520 families with play-based response strategies that and that support mental health and psychosocial health for families. And so use those phone calls as a model to think about how can we connect people through one-on-one phone calls, through WhatsApp, through virtual meetings like this, and then using play at the heart of it with their children to connect families with one another and connect across families. So those are the kinds of response strategies that we've developed. So that's where I'll close. And hopefully that's provided a little bit of insight into the work that we're doing at Play Africa. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Gretchen. It's an amazing business that you have and a museum you have running there. It's like you say, starting with all the children at the center, which is all you can really ask for. I think we've had such great speakers. Has anyone got any questions? I don't see if anyone, I don't really know, maybe it's not working. Everyone's very shy today. It's lunchtime maybe. But I think all three of you have brought, it's a subject all very close to all of our hearts, yet they're all such different focuses, which is the most important thing. And what really drew me, like I said in the first place, when I switched my research to using phenomenology and the learned experience, that's so much more of an important starting point for me to understand my reaction to access for my son. And it calmed my understanding down. It made me feel relevant. It made my concerns valid. And I think if we can keep listening to the individuals as opposed to being an organization thinking about inclusivity, but focus on the individuals, we would all maybe have a different version of inclusivity and a different vision, like Rich says, bringing everyone back in, and you, Gretchen, wanting to bring everyone back in. So it's really inspiring, and I'm so happy and proud that you've come along, and thank you for speaking for me today. Caroline is actually sat next to me now. And I think you're a
technical hitch.
Yeah. So we're in the same room now. That's actually allowed. And yeah, thank you so much, and thank you everyone for attending. I hope that if you have any further questions, you can email myself and I can pass them on. If anyone has now, shout or wave, or John, Richard, if you have anything you'd like to add, or Gretchen, then please feel free to speak in now. It's been really amazing.
The only thing I'd like to say is I want to go to Johannesburg and work with Play Africa.
I could see a collaboration going through your mind there.
Absolutely.
And that would be a great
see that Caroline Fisher has a question in the chat. Shall I read it out loud, and maybe Richard and Caroline can answer? Thank you so much for your presentations. It's been fascinating and I've learned a lot. Can I ask the speakers what advice you might give to young curators starting out and perhaps working in institutions?
Wow.
I believe that from my side, I mean, I think I feel very blessed to be a regular speaker in different kinds of museum consortia. I find that I feel really blessed to do that. But I think one of the things that really resonates for me is that so many people share that the kind of thinking that we're doing at Play Africa is really not usual within a lot of the more traditional institutions. Now, I think we're an outsider in so many ways that I don't know whatever advice I have would be useful, but I think that if there is a way to come up with your own approach to inclusion and thinking about very much outside the box about ways to include new audiences, there is a demand for many, many institutions to start to think creatively about ways to get new audiences in the door. So, you know, I think there is a lot of value in, if this is something that you're passionate about thinking about ways within, if you're just starting out, getting interviews and bringing to the table some ideas that you have of attracting new audiences. I think that would be quite novel and innovative for many institutions, but I'll hand over to Richard and Caroline as well too.
I think it can be a very isolated thing to try and do on your own, and I think so the more you work with other people, bring other people in, don't think you have to reinvent everything and start from scratch. Find people like other organizations who've done this before, find other people in other museums who are doing the same work, make connections to give yourself support in your work, because I think although we're not in museums, we have tried to collaborate with some mainstream theatres, and you can usually have great dialogue at a certain level within the organization, but when you try and go higher up, that's where the barriers start to be put in place. So you work with as much as possible with other people to influence the people above, and you can't do that on your own. There has to be a much broader context, I think, to how you try and solve problems like that within your particular organisation.
Yeah,
I would absolutely agree with that. That, you know, there are always people out there who've done similar things, or, you know, who you can work with and get ideas. I mean, sort of thinking of it, you know, from my museum career, and I know Alison and I have spoken about this as well, is that, you know, it is not thinking of these things as an add-on, but to actually be collaborating with people and talking about these from the very inception of the start of your project. And so often, I mean, I think that these things fall down when people start kind of going, oh yes, no, that's going to be, you know, in a very basic way, too high up, or to, you know, like for some reason, and it's just all the wrong way around. And I know, you know, that when I was working as an exhibition designer, you know, bringing people in and starting talking, particularly when we used a lot of external designers, talking to them about the fact that, you know, these questions are part of the design from the very inception. And I think that, you know, there's a lot of really exciting work out there. And, you know, that's what I'd say. Start from the beginning, think of it always, you know.
Yeah.
And the other thing I just want to say is, you know, just going back to what Richard was saying, about the value of a human life. And, you know, I found that really moving when you were saying that, and I would definitely go back to Havi Carell's book.
Yeah.
She talks a lot about that. You know, how can you be happy? How can, you know, what is a fulfilled life? You know, it's not about being able-bodied. It's something much more, and there's big fundamental questions we all ought to be asking ourselves, and that book is such a prompt to that. I would really recommend it to everybody.
No, definitely.
Yeah.
Actually, the work of Havi Carell changed completely how I approach this project. I like I said at the beginning, I know I cannot change physical access for everybody. I can certainly point out things that are not correct. We can experience, when I attend things with Frankie and with all my children, you know, we face challenges, and some of them are at the front door, you know, and for people with mental barriers, that the front door is even too much for them to get to. So if people could start, I really want to take this further. I don't know how I'm going to do that, but I think the phenomenological way of really hearing the stories behind how these people feel. Richard, like your cast, you share their ideas of what normal is. It's, you know, not wrapped up in that at all. And if anyone else has anyone that might like to add to my book of testimonies, I really am. I've got some amazing people who've sent one-liners. Some people have sent 3 sides. One lady, Richard, who is blind and a power chair user, her biggest query was, I love the theatre, but to get to the theatre, I'm allowed 1 carer seat for my husband, so I can't take my daughter because my daughter isn't old enough to be a carer to sit with me in that seat, so I can't go to the theatre. And that process has happened before she's booked the tickets.
Yeah.
You know, so theatre is closed to her. She can't now share theatre with her daughter. And as much as I understand wheelchairs are big and cumbersome, goodness me, we should be able to fit a few more in. It's and that is thinking about the whole audience, right back to the title of our work. Why are they in the shadows? Let's send them to the uptight performances and make the theatre, the gallery and the museum a little bit more vibrant. And Gretchen, like your children that are not welcome. I mean, it's almost hard to say the phrase "are not welcome." In certain situations. I mean, I've got 4 boys, and I can have many a time when they've not been quiet, and I've had to move through a situation, and you just carry on. Everyone is, and really people aren't that bothered, but if you're in situations where you feel that you're bothering people, that twists your whole day. You leave and you probably don't come back.
Yeah.
I think one of the things to just share for our side is that, you know, whether it's a recent immigrant from Zimbabwe or a parent of a child with a disability, we find that so many of our audience feel that they are excluded in every institution that they go to, whether it's trying to apply and to get into a school, being at a hospital, trying to get service from a belligerent nursing staff, trying to get support at a police station when, you know, doing certain kinds of administrative, applying for grants or social grants, or at the Department of Social Development. You know, there is a sense that these institutions that exist out there ostensibly to support the public are actually quite hostile to a lot of our audience. And so we think about how can we be the most inclusive and welcoming, non-judgmental space in all of Johannesburg. And by putting the audience at the audience which represents the majority of South Africa, which is, you know, really everyone. By putting that audience at the heart of our work, we're trying to, again, disrupt these systems that have been built in to be so exclusionary from colonialism and then later apartheid until now. And it's just trying to show a new way of thinking about, again, the value of human life and the value of putting through empathy at the heart of everything we do. So in some ways, I just wanted to go back to that question from Caroline around what the advice I have is, so much of what I think makes the work that we're doing quite innovative in our context is by ignoring what everyone else is doing and doing what we believe needs to be done. And I'm dead serious that I think in some ways, by being somehow isolated in a context in which we're just making it up the way we believe it needs to be done, is really what is creating the kind of profound impact of our work.
Yeah. I'll just say a couple of things. One about the welcome thing, which I think is really interesting. A lot of buildings say, we welcome everyone. And the particular theatre where we pioneered relaxed performance with, that became their strapline. Everyone is welcome. And we had a consultation process over that. And I said, can we just unpick this a little bit, please? Because you're saying everyone is welcome, but what you actually mean is some people are more welcome than others. Some people are only welcome at certain times. And some people, if we welcome them, we can't welcome you. So let's just be honest about, you're a commercial organisation and you rely on people paying 150 quid for a ticket in your theatre. So in what way is everyone welcome? And that's quite hard stuff to say, but it's not about knocking, it's about being realistic about what's going on. So I think we need all the time to recognise that we say things that we think are great. We've got a lift, but if the lift is at the other side of the building, what's the point? So we have to unpick all of that. I think the other thing that we have discovered through our work is the importance of connection. And I picked that up from what Gretchen was saying as well, that connection is at the heart of everything we do. And in a very broad brushstroke terms, we live in a world of separation and we need to discover how to work in a world of interconnection. That's a really broad brushstroke, but it's fundamentally true. And we always say, when we're working, what we've got this notion called the space between, which is what is it that the two of us can do that neither of us can do on our own? And that's the core of what we do. And that's a very difficult notion in our society because we are trained to be individuals in our own right with no connection with other people, basically. So we're, in the same way that Gretchen was saying, we're getting on and doing this because we fundamentally believe in it, but it's not welcomed in the world to be like that. We say, absolutely, it's between us what's happening. So creativity is not exclusive to me or you, it's something we do together. That's the core. So, so I just wanted to add those two little bits in.
No, it's been amazing. Actually, I've got written on my notes here in big letters, disrupt. And I do a lot of disrupting, but I don't do enough, obviously. And I will up my disrupting to the highest level. I'm so happy to have had you all speak here. They're three such massively different areas of access. And I've always said, I think I said it to you before, Richard, that if someone talks about becoming inclusive, well, you're clearly flagging up that you're not inclusive right now. So inclusivity is that word that I don't want it. I want it to just be welcome. And this is what I'm going to move forward and try and do more research, get it through, get my book of testimonies out to as many curators and institutions to understand that sometimes they haven't heard the people. Those voices are not heard. We're going to drag them out of the shadows, put them in the spotlight, and put them alongside everyone else who already feels welcome in your institution. So disrupt, everybody. Everyone go out and disrupt. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you everyone for listening in. I hope you've learned something or engage with other businesses so you can maybe check out the theatre group and Gretchen's Play Africa. It's been really brilliant. Thank you so much. We finished a little bit early so everyone can go and have some lunch now. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Gretchen. It's pretty breakfast time for you, actually, isn't it?
Thank you so much, everybody. It's been wonderful.
I'll be in touch soon. Thank
opportunity.
you. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.